flick. All right, so what about this data access block? I mean, people, you know, we've shown you ADO.NET. I mean, you've seen ADO.NET. Ken just kind of got done showing a bunch of ADO.NET stuff. You know, why did Microsoft then come out with this data access application block? Is this something new? I mean, you're thinking, oh my God, I've been through, let's see, ODBC API, I've been through VB-SQL, I've been through JET, I've been through ADO, RDO, you know. How many other O's are we going to hit here, right? No, this is not anything new. This is simply a wrapper on top of ADO.NET. I mean, ADO.NET is really a nice engine. We like it, okay? But sometimes it gets a little wordy, all right? Sometimes it takes a few more lines of code than you really think it should take. So what they did is they took and created a layer on top of ADO.NET that they wrote in .NET, right, that helps wrap it up and makes it a little bit simpler to use. That was really the idea. Now, these application blocks that they're creating, and there's going to be about 3 more coming out. I think they're coming out around May or June of 2003 here, okay? But basically what you're going to find is they're coming out of what's called the PAG group, the Microsoft Prescriptive Architecture Group. These are folks up in Redmond that go out, work with clients, work with some of the big guys that are doing a lot of big projects, and try to look at what they're doing and where are those repeated bits of code and what took a little too many lines of code to work with. What was confusing to those people getting started in .NET? These are all the things that they look at, and then they decide to make an application block out of it. They do that by trying to make the code simpler then to use. Okay? So they're identifying the best practices by working with these partners. And the data access application block was the first one that they came out with. It's simply a wrapper on top of ADO.NET that makes it easier. You can retrieve and modify data. You can call transact SQL or stored procedures. It uses only the SQL client namespace. So now if you're not using SQL Server, you're not going to be able to take advantage of this. Okay? However, I did hear somebody told me the other day that somebody else actually wrote a data access application block very similar to this for Oracle. Okay, so if you are using remember that other database system? Anybody ever heard of that Oracle thing? Okay, so if you are using that one, I heard that if you just go up and search on MSDN, I believe they have it up there, or it might be on Google. Just do a search on Google and you'll find, you know, the reference to where it is. It might be up on got.net or something like that. What they did is they went back and rewrote some of the ones like Pet Shop and the iBuy Sportal, you know, demo sites that Microsoft uses a lot. And they actually rewrote them using the data access application block. And they found that they cut down the amount of code for the data access side by like almost 30–40%. It was amazing. But what was even more amazing is that there was no significant performance penalty for wrapping this up, which is really cool. Now, when you download this is actually a download. You don't get this right out of the box with Visual Studio.NET. So it is up to you to go up and download this, and I've given you the link here, okay? And remember, all these slides, you're going to get all the PowerPoints. You can download them right off our site and search on Data Access Application Block on MSDN, okay? You'll find all of this. And they give you the full source code, both in VB.NET and in C#, and complete documentation, complete with usage scenarios. They actually give you sample code that you can try out, and all the reference material about the different objects that are in here. Okay? Pretty simple tool to use, actually. The idea here is every time that we use ADO.NET, we have to dim a new data set. We have to dim a data adapter. We have to dim a command object. We have to dim a connection object, right? Well, they said, you know, that's just too much dimming going on, all right? So they ended up creating one class that has many shared methods to it, or static methods if you're using C#. Okay? How many use both VB and C#? Does anybody? A few of you do. Okay. All right. Interesting. Yeah. So what they've done is and if you look at these methods, I mean, this should look pretty familiar to you. If you look at the command object, right? We have an execute non-query, for example. Okay? We have an execute reader. Okay? And then they gave us things like execute data set, all right, and execute scalar. They also gave us an XML reader. So if you're doing a select with a for XML clause in SQL Server and you want to get back that XML document fragment, okay, you can actually put it right into an XML text reader in .NET. So they've given us all of these things as nice shared methods. So you're thinking, oh, well, that's pretty easy to learn. Yeah, it is. The only one thing that's kind of bad about this is that there's about 9 overloads on each one of these. Okay, so there's all sorts of different combinations of these that you can use. But it's still pretty darn easy to use. So for you, what you're going to do is you're going to reference this DLL. And this is what's weird. They give you an MSI file. They install the whole thing. It gives you just a nice little, you know, menu on your program, start program menu, okay? But they don't give you the DLL. You actually have to go and compile it. All right, so that's just a little thing there. Once you have the compiled DLL, it's called Microsoft.applicationblocks.data.dll. So you need to set a reference to that in your project. Okay, then you can import, in VB it's nice because you can import a project-wide namespace, all right, Microsoft.applicationblocks.data, so that you can then just say SQL helper dot, and you'll get that nice little shared list of methods that I talked about. So I'll go into this sample, and all I'm going to do is load this data grid, okay, using ADO.NET, because I want to show you the difference between the two. So the first thing that we did here is I have server equals localhost. You know, there's my connection string. I just dimmed it as a constant just to keep it kind of simple. So here we go. I'm dimming all this code, right? So this is the code that I would use in normal ADO.NET. Now I did take out the error handling here, all right? So don't shoot me. It's just for demonstration purposes only, okay? So I'm going to fill up that data set. Once I've got the data set, I can then feed the data grid. So you're thinking, yeah, well, that's not too bad. I mean, how many lines of code I got there? Maybe 8 lines of code, right? Okay. When I use this SQL helper now that comes from the Microsoft Data Access Application blocks, let's take a look at the code here. The only real difference here is I've lost the data adapter. Okay, I still dimmed a data set, but I didn't do it as a new data set. I just dimmed it as a data set. Okay. And it's not a terrible amount of less code. However, when I show the updating, you will see a lot less code. I'm still doing the select from products. I'm going to execute the data set on this SQL helper. SQL helper is the one that comes from that Microsoft.applicationblocks.data namespace. Okay, so the first thing that I did once I added the reference to that DLL, so I came into my global imports and I added, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't do it here, did I? Did it at the top of this file. Okay. I imported that namespace, so I didn't have to dim, you know, or actually say Microsoft.applicationblocks.data.SQL helper. Instead, I can just now say SQL helper, execute data set, passing in a connection string. Then it wants the type of text that you're passing in. And if you're used to ADO.NET, you know that the command type property has basically 3 options: store procedure, or is it the name of a table, or is it just regular text like some transact SQL. And that's what I'm doing here, is passing in that SQL string. What this does is it takes care of dimming a new instance of a data set, okay, creating the data adapter, filling up that data set, and then simply returning that to me. Okay. Not a great deal of code savings on this one, but every little bit helps in certain cases. Okay, pretty simple. Data reader. Let's take a look at a data reader. Again, what we'll do is we'll take a look at, first off, using ADO.NET. I have to dim a data reader, dim a command object, my select statement, build a new instance of that SQL command object. I'm passable string there. Okay. I then have to create a new SQL connection. Once I get that connection, I then have to open that connection. I then set the command text, okay, the command typed to the command.text enumeration. Then I can say, okay, command object, you've got everything you need. Let's go ahead and execute this reader and give me back a data reader. All right. You typically want to do the command behavior of close connection, don't you, on a data reader? All right, so when you close the data reader, it closes the connection. Then you can just do whatever you're going to do with the data reader. You know, I'm just looping through here. Okay. Now, I don't know about you, but remember the old ADO days? When you used to write loops like this, and then all of a sudden you'd be sitting there forever waiting for it to come back because you forgot what? The move next. Then you do that all the time. I know I did, and it really used to piss me off too, you know. So now we just can say do while dr.read. It's really nice. Okay. So once I'm all done, obviously we're going to do a data reader.close here, and we're all done. All right, so let's take a look at the same code then now using the SQL helper. So in the SQL helper class, well, it's basically about the same amount of code as it was for the data set now. So we really did cut out quite a few lines of code on this one, didn't we? So we come in, we do the SQL helper execute reader, and they did all of the exact same code that you saw right there. They did that down in this execute reader method. Pretty simple. Okay, when I'm all done, I simply close that data reader. Okay. Questions on that so far? Pretty simple?
Was the command behavior inferred then? The command behavior was inferred on this version?
The command behavior, okay, yeah. The question is, remember how here I did the command behavior.close connection. Okay, what are they doing underneath the hood in this execute reader? They are doing the exact same one. Yes, they actually do the command behavior and set the closed connection. Yep.
You give the option of changing
Yes, you still have that option of leaving it open if you want.
the overload.
Yep, one of the overloads for the execute reader. Okay, let me go ahead and stop the code here, and we'll see all the different variations of this this overload here. There's 9 overloads on the execute reader. Okay, you can pass in a transaction, you can pass in a stored procedure name, you can pass in a param array of all the parameters that you're feeding to your stored procedure. Okay, the transaction again, the command text that you want to pass in. Connection objects. So now it detects if you pass down a connection object to it, it's going to use that connection. In that case, you probably don't want it to do a closed connection, do you? Okay, so in that case, it would not set that option. And we can go take a look at the code. We have the full source code here. Okay? And sometimes it's kind of neat to go out there and look at, the source code here. The data access one, that's pretty simple. But the exception management is where you really see some really cool and interesting stuff. So here is, the complete list here, and as you can see, all the different overloads here. Okay, here's the execute reader, for example, right? Okay, so basically they all kind of come down to one thing here, where they're actually, dimming a SQL command, the data reader, they're doing a prepare command if you're a SQL server. Okay, it's detecting whether the connection is owned, which means did you pass down that connection, and if it does, it just does execute reader. Otherwise, it does the closed connection for you.